If you're kinder to yourself, you're going to end up on the couch all day long binging on Netflix, right? Actually, what we know from research is that the opposite is true. In a 4-year longitudinal study, when you experience stress and you're self-compassionate at the same time, you build resilience. We can teach ourselves how. I usually take them through a series of comforting gestures they can try out and use. You want to do it? You want to try it out?
Yes, let's do it.
Professor Dr. Karen Bluth,
professor in the Department of Psychiatry
at the University of North Carolina.
She's conducted a huge amount of research on self-compassion.
Here's the thing nobody tells teenagers or adults. Your biggest enemy isn't stress or school or drama. It's the voice inside your head. And today, we're sitting down with someone who has 50 years of proof that you can retrain that voice. Karen Bluth is a leading researcher on self-compassion, and her work shows that when we learn just a few simple tools, anxiety drops, depression drops, and we can like ourselves without validation from others. If you've ever felt not enough, embarrassed, overwhelmed, or terrified of failing, you're gonna leave this episode with real and actionable practices that you can use tonight. This isn't be nice to yourself fluff. It's science-based, brain-changing, life-changing stuff. Let's get into it.
Welcome to Hack Your Happiness.
Welcome, Karen.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us. I think that we're going to have a really incredible conversation today, and I'm really excited. You're a successful researcher and author on self-compassion, particularly amongst teenagers, which I think is so interesting. How did you discover your passion for teaching this, and how did you get started?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Thanks for asking that. I actually got into practicing mindfulness meditation, although we didn't call it that, but I got into that when I was a teenager. I was in my senior year of high school, so maybe I was 16 or 17, and I needed a topic for my independent study project for an English class, and I didn't have it, and it was due the next day. So I remember driving down the road and seeing out of the corner of my eye this sign that said something about TM, Transcendental Meditation. It was 1975. And I remembered hearing something about meditation, and particularly Zen Buddhism, in a social studies class that I was taking, my social studies class. And I remember that there was something about it that just resonated with me, that connected with me in some way, and I thought, oh, that looks interesting. And I turned in, and they gave me some brochures about transcendental meditation. They said, come back on Saturday and you can get initiated. I had no idea what that meant, but I went back on Saturday, and they did this little thing. And anyway, that's when I started practicing what eventually, then it was TM, Transcendental Meditation, but years later, I started practicing mindfulness meditation. So that's how it got started. And then when I had little kids, and this is in the 90s, like many little kids, my kids wouldn't fall asleep at nap time. So I spent a fair amount of time with them in their car seats, in the back of the car, driving around. And I had a regular meditation group at the time. And we were passing around this, it was actually a cassette tape. So this is the 90s, right? Cassette tape on poetry of self-compassion. And because I was in the car a fair amount, I spent a lot of time listening to this tape. And it was this British poet, David White, reading these really beautiful poems about self-compassion. And so it kind of became internalized in me because I listened to that tape so much. And then years later, I went back to school and started studying mindfulness and self-compassion. So, so that's how I got into it. It was always, it started as a teenager, when I was a teenager myself. And it's been a lifelong journey, really.
That's crazy. I love how it's been with you for such a long time.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I'm curious, Karen, what exactly like are the biggest things that you learned from doing mindfulness and meditation for so long? And I know obviously nowadays we talk about it as such a great way to like relieve stress or become more present in the moment. But I'm curious, after practicing it for 50 years, what lessons that's maybe taught you that you still carry with you?
Yeah, well, as I said, it's a lifelong process. So initially, I explained how I got into it. I don't think it was about stress relieving for me at that time. I think if anything, I was really looking for some kind of deeper meaning in life. I just somehow knew that there was more to life, more meaning to life than what I was experiencing as a teenager. So that's why I got into it. Lifelong lessons, I could not even begin. I couldn't even begin because it's been a huge part of my life for 50 years. And now, probably now more than ever, because I've recently, in the just early part of this year, retired from my university position. So I have more time. So I'm spending more time doing these practices, more time going on retreat. But to answer your question, what have I learned? What effect has it had on me? I think one, when difficult things happen, to take them more lightly, I don't think I get all bent out of shape or super stressed out about things the way I used to. I certainly don't take them personally at all. There's always, and this is very strong presence in my life, and this also involves the work that you do, is I'm very aware of all the positive things that there are in life, the beauty that there is in life. And, I'm a little hesitant to say beauty because it sounds so corny, but, just little things, that you see all the time, like, cup of tea, the color of, I'm looking at a red mug, I love that color red, just little things that are there all the time. I'm very aware of those.
I love that. I think that's so beautiful, and that's very aligned with our mission of spreading the small good things. And I'm very curious, and I know our audience is as well. What exactly is self-compassion?
Yeah, so we have an informal definition and a formal definition. The informal definition is treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend when you're having a hard time, right? So, and we know that most of us, over 80% of us, are much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on a good friend. So if a good friend's having a hard time and they come to you and, you would think nothing of, saying nice things to them, being supportive to them. We're not that way usually to ourselves. Not most of us, right? We're much harder on ourselves. We're much more self-critical, much more self-judgmental. So that's the informal definition. Treating yourself the way you would treat a good friend when you're having a hard time. The more formal definition, and this comes from the work of Kristen Neff, so I don't want listeners to think that I came up with this. This is Kristen Neff's work. 3 components of self-compassion. The first one is mindfulness, and in this case, mindfulness, what we're talking about is having a balanced perspective. So when something doesn't go your way, rather than thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful, this is going to be the end of me, this is terrible, I'm going to flunk out of school, I'm never going to get into college, I'm whatever, we can tend to perseverate, spiral out. Saying, this wasn't my best moment, maybe, it won't last forever, this is temporary, things change, we can always count on the fact that things change. So having a balanced perspective, that's the first component. The second component is common humanity. And common humanity is the understanding that when we experience difficult things, difficult emotions like feeling sad, feeling lonely, feeling frustrated, angry, what have you, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. It's part of the human condition to feel these feelings, to feel sad sometimes, to feel anxious, to feel upset. This is what it's like to be human, walk around in a human body. We're fed this idea from our culture that we're supposed to be happy all the time, but that's unrealistic. That's not the way life is. And so common humanity is just this understanding that, we're not alone in these difficult emotions. And the last component is self-kindness. So when you're experiencing these difficult times, these difficult emotions, being kind to yourself, saying the kinds of things to yourself that you would say to a good friend, like, oh, this is really hard. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you're going through this. This is tough. I know this is hard. It's not going to last forever. You'll get through this. So to have that supportive, encouraging, compassionate voice within you.
I adore that, the breakdown that you gave us. Like, first of all, I love the informal definition of thinking of how would I treat my friend? Like, if my friend got this on a test, or if my friend accidentally did that in public, how would you treat them? Is such a great way to go about determining how we should ourselves respond to something we've done or said. But I also love that more formal, I guess, breakdown of like mindfulness, of common humanity. I really like that. I think we don't talk about that enough, like, as a culture, and also just self-kindness. I love the concept of the common humanity because I've never quite thought about it that way, of like feeling angry or feeling frustrated or feeling, embarrassed. Those are human emotions. You don't have to be ashamed of that, but it's also just having that self-kindness and being able to say, you know what, it's okay, this too shall pass, right? And this is just an aspect of that, and obviously it's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
But I think that's a really interesting way to kind of reframe it and say, okay, well, this is just a part of being a human, and it's inevitable to feel that way, but I don't need to like linger in it or make that worse for my own self.
Right, exactly. And it is easier said than done, but that's why we practice, because it becomes a habit. So now, because, I've been doing these practices for a long time, when that voice comes up, that critical voice, it's like, oh, remember? And it's right there, right behind it. Oh, remember, this is what it's like to be human. You're allowed to make a mistake. You're not perfect. You're not going to be perfect. And that's okay.
Exactly. And if someone's listening to this, and honestly, I'm curious too, how can we tell if we actually have a healthy relationship to ourselves? Like, is there some certain questions that our listeners and us, we can ask ourselves to kind of determine how healthy our own relationship is to ourselves? Or maybe you could describe what a healthy relationship to oneself looks like?
Yeah, so I think it's a sense of, the way I would describe it is a sense of okayness, a sense of feeling relatively at peace with yourself most of the time. And notice I'm putting these qualifiers in there, relatively most of the time, because none of us are going to feel great about ourselves all the time. That's just, we're human. That's not going to happen. So So to feel generally at peace with ourselves, and also to know in those moments when we don't, in those moments when we're feeling like, oh, God, I shouldn't have said that, or oh, that was a stupid thing that I did. In those moments, remembering, oh, wait, I can be nice to myself right now because I'm human. I can say something nice to myself. I can be kind to myself. So recognizing, having that awareness, recognizing when you're feeling good and when you're being self-critical, and when you're being self-critical, taking an active role, taking a step to say, to be kind to yourself, be supportive to yourself.
Totally. I think something that I want to start doing after hearing what you said is this idea of when you're having that critical thought, which again is common humanity, it's inevitable to not have any criticism of yourself. Like, say you trip, or maybe you don't do so good on a math test, or maybe you don't get the job you wanted. It's normal to have some criticism for yourself, but kind of identifying what is my default dialogue? Am I immediately oh, I'm the worst, or is it it's okay, this is just, a phase of life. I can do better at my next try, or let's try something a little bit different for this second attempt or
and
whatever.
What I find is really interesting is I think we as a society put a lot of emphasis on trying to find negative people around us. And I think that is so important to be able to kind of root out if this friend is making you feel bad. But at the same time, even if we find that friend and we kind of distance ourselves, we can't then get away from the negative self-talk we give ourselves, because that's ourself. And I think we really need to find the deep root of that, because that'll make the most impact.
Yeah, and by finding what your kind of default dialogue almost is, then you can be more intentional of like trying those practices, like you were saying, and then noticing how that kind of changes for yourself over time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what this is all about, and that's what our self-compassion program that we teach teens is all about, is developing that awareness of what our default, as you were saying, as you were calling it, our default self-dialogue is, right? Like what comes up in the moment when, you fail a math test, or, when you miss the winning goal on this winning soccer goal or whatever. What is that? And developing that awareness. And that's the mindfulness piece, actually. That's okay, what am I saying to myself? And all it is a habit. This is just a habit that we've developed over the course of our lives, right? We don't have to stay with it. It's not like in stone, Like we can change that inner dialogue. And that's what we teach people to do.
I love that. And speaking of teens, you have done such extensive research on the subject of self-compassion, specifically in teens. Could you share with us the most surprising and interesting things you've uncovered about this?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, overall, what we see consistently across the research with teens, and actually with adults also, is that those teens that are more self-compassionate experience less anxiety, depression, and stress. And even in our most recent study, which was with teens who had some suicidal ideation, we saw significant decreases in their suicidal ideation from beginning to the end of the study, right? So we taught them self-compassion. So we know that those teens who are more self-compassionate are experience better mental health overall. We also know that self-compassion is protective against some of the difficult things that come up through adolescence. For example, we know that as adolescents age, they from age 11 to 19, they tend to get more depressed, and that's really led by females, right? So we know it's more true with females than with males. But among those females who are self-compassionate, we see less depression, right? So self-compassion is protective against becoming more depressed. We also see that we know depression is linked to stress. When you're stressed, you tend to be you're more likely to get depressed. It's less true if you're self-compassionate. We know depression is also linked to self-injury, cutting. And we know that among teens who are depressed, they're less likely to self-injure if they're self-compassionate. So we see this protective effect across lots of different studies of self-compassion. One very interesting result that was not in one of my studies, but was in one of my colleagues' studies, which just came out last year, was that when you experience stress and you're self-compassionate at the same time, you build resilience. So this was in a 4-year longitudinal study among undergraduates, a large group of undergraduates. And so we know that, a little bit of stress isn't necessarily bad for you. And when you're self-compassionate in those moments, when you're feeling stressed, you will develop greater resilience. So I thought that was really interesting.
I think that's so interesting.
That is amazing.
And what I like about what you said there that I kind of wanted to hit on is like the fact that, if you have stress and you couple that with self-compassion, it's actually like beneficial. It's making you more resilient, because I know we've talked with several psychiatrists and stress experts on our show about how like stress isn't going, like, you can't just get rid of stress, or it's not always actually, like, you don't want to get rid of stress. It helps you, get up in the morning. It helps you get things done and be productive in this world, and
Gives you motivation
and protect you from harm. And I think, the fact that, like, we don't want to get rid of stress, it's not about completely reducing that. It's about giving ourselves good tools to be able to manage that and then turn it into resilience and things that benefit our lives. And so I think that's super fascinating. But I'm curious, I know you said that females tend to kind of lead that depression, especially through adolescence. And I'm so curious, what is it about, being a teenage girl that makes it just, I guess, harder in that sense and increases depression amongst those?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And that's not, and it's a question that I'm really interested in, and I have been really interested in, but I haven't done research around that question. I've read a fair amount about it. I think there's a lot of, from what I've read, there's quite a few theories about it. One is biological, that it may have to do with the production of, and I can't, as I said, this isn't my area of research, so I might be getting some of these terms wrong, but production of estradiol, or which is a precursor, I think, of estrogen, and it has to do with the fluctuation of these different hormones or hormone precursors in females. That's one possible theory. Also cultural, that the way traditionally that females, the expectation of females is different than the expectation of males, and so the way that traditionally we have raised girls is different than the way that we have raised boys. That could have something to do with it. So there's quite a number of theories on this, and there's been quite a bit written about it. But I think that's all I can share right now, because I'm really, it's not really my focus.
Of course, I completely understand. I was just curious, but I think it's interesting how, based on your area of focus, like, self-compassion is so beneficial.
Yes.
Whether you are struggling with your happiness or your stress or not, like, it's just such an easy practice that is impactful.
Yes,
like,
it's
everyone.
beneficial for everybody. Yeah. And if a teen or adult is listening to this podcast today, what's a simple self-compassion practice that they can try out?
Yeah, so one of the most simple ones that we do, that we teach to teens, we teach to adults, is something called comforting gestures. So we readily, if a friend is struggling, we would think nothing of giving them a hug or patting them on the back or putting our arm around them or whatever. We don't do those kinds of things for ourselves, right? It comes very naturally to us. And the reason that it comes naturally to us to give a friend a hug is because there's a release of a chemical called oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone. And it feels good for us, it feels good for them, it's very natural. It's part of our culture. But giving ourselves those comforting gestures is not part of our culture. But it can be. We can teach ourselves how. So when we teach teens and adults, I usually preface it. I give them a little bit of background on the physiology of what happens, and then take them through a series of potential comforting gestures that they can try out and use to see if it works for them. Do you want to do it? You want to try it out?
Yes, let's do it. We all know someone who struggles with self-compassion, aside from ourselves. We all can struggle with feeling self-compassionate, with being hard on ourselves, with thinking that we're not worthy or good enough. So help someone out and show them that they are worthy, that they are good enough, and that they mean something to you by sending them this episode link. It's quick, it's free, it literally takes 3 seconds, and it can really transform someone's life. I know a number of friends that I'm going to be sending this episode link to right after we're done recording it. So I encourage you to do the same, because it means the world to us and to them. So now let's get back into the conversation.
All right, so I'll describe them, because I know that this podcast is audio, but you'll see what I'm doing. Okay. All right. So if you're comfortable closing your eyes, you can close your eyes. You don't have to. It's a little bit easier to get in touch with what you're feeling with your eyes closed. For some reason, I always close my eyes when I lead this. Okay, so the first one is just putting your two hands together, your palms of your hands together, and just rub them back and forth a little bit. Noticing what that feels like. And if that's comforting. Maybe noticing a little bit of warmth. You can try crossing your arms across your chest, stroking your upper arms, and seeing how that feels for you. Seeing if that feels supportive or soothing. Or you can give yourself a little squeeze, a little hug, and see how that feels. Again, with your arms crossed across your chest. Or you could try putting one hand on your forehead and the other hand on the back of your neck. And again, noticing what that feels like. You might notice warmth or coolness. Or maybe try putting both hands on either cheek so that you're cradling your face in your hands. And seeing how this feels for you. Or maybe just placing one hand over your heart. And just noticing that gentle pressure of your hand on your heart. Or maybe making small circles with your hand over your heart, seeing if that's soothing. Or maybe two hands over your heart, just placing one hand on top of the other hand over your heart. I like this one because it feels like I'm protecting my heart. Maybe one hand in the other hand in your lap, and maybe just stroking one hand with the other hand. And then the last one, just making a fist with one hand, putting it over your heart and putting the other hand on top of it. And this, for a lot of people, this feels like strength and courage. Okay, so if your eyes have been open or have been closed, you can open your eyes. And so I could ask you, Mercedes and Anastasia, what do you think? Were there any gestures, any that felt soothing or comforting for you?
Yes. Absolutely. I think that's also really great because I feel like it's almost very similar to mindfulness, because in that moment you're really just thinking about the position that you're doing and you're feeling your body instead of getting caught up in your head, which is a great way to kind of help stop overthinking if someone's going through that.
But I think what I really liked, my favorite one, well, I have a few of them that are my favorite. I really liked the one of like just like kind of giving yourself a little hug. I think that's such a sweet way to kind of like, I don't know, I'm always cold too, so I can just like warm up. But I also liked the putting your palms on your face. I think that's something nice that I can be doing like when I'm maybe a little bit stressed, you know, writing my exams or feeling just a little bit overwhelmed at a desk or a table, like just doing something like that. It's so subtle and not super noticeable, but super helpful.
For me, I love putting my hands on my chest. That's something I also did before, but I think that is a really nice way because it makes you really feel connected to yourself because your chest kind of feels like the center of your body. As well as I love the hand kind of thing where you can have it in your lap and just kind of stroke it. I feel like that's also such a great way to kind of ground yourself and like move your attention somewhere else. And it's also something that you can do so easily.
That's what I love. These are like the epitome of a back pocket tool, right? It's like when you are, like maybe you just found out that, you know, you didn't do so great on a test, or maybe you're upset at yourself for not handling a situation in a certain way. You can just kind of put your hands in a fist and, you know, feel better that way. Just like remind yourself that it's okay. You're your own friend, and it's going to turn out in the end.
Yeah, and as you said, these gestures are back pocket tools, right? You know, you always have them with you. So that's one of the many reasons we like to introduce them.
Incredible. I think that's such a fantastic little self-compassion
And I also think that
activity.
it's crazy that by just doing something as like subtle and simple as that can reduce your levels of like depression or reduce your anxiety or like prevent that. And I think it's so crazy on how something so small can make such a huge impact, so positive on our life.
Yeah, and there's research on it also that shows that it is effective. So it's not just me over here sitting in my chair saying it, you know. There's actually research that's been done.
I love that. That's incredible. So I'm really curious because I think sometimes some teens or maybe adults might view self-compassion as, you know, it is great for reducing stress or, you know, making you feel more confident about yourself. But in terms of like productivity or how well you're going to perform, is there any correlation between self-compassion and our motivation? And if so, how are those two kind of related? Does self-compassion like lower our motivation, or how is that related?
I am so glad that you're asking this question because there's a misconception about self-compassion. A lot of people think that if you're kinder to yourself, you're going to end up on the couch all day long binging on Netflix, right? Actually, what we know from research is that the opposite is true. That people who are more self-compassionate are actually more motivated to move outside of their comfort zone, to try new things, to take on positive risks. And the reason is that they're not so afraid of failure, you know? There's less fear of failure. Because if you think about it, it makes sense, right? That if you're afraid of failing, if you're afraid of trying something new or putting yourself out there because you're afraid you're going to fail, you're going to be less likely to try it, right? But if you know that, well, if I fail at this, it doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. It doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It just means that, like, this time it didn't work out for me. Maybe this isn't the right thing for me, or the right sport for me, or the right activity, or whatever. Or maybe it's just not the right activity for me right now at this particular time. Or maybe there's a different approach, or whatever, right? It doesn't mean that I'm a failure. So there's less fear of failure. And we actually have research on this with teens that shows that teens who are more self-compassionate are more willing to embrace new experiences, take on positive risks, move outside of their comfort zone.
That is so incredible. And I think that really puts down like that motivation piece that, you know, if we're self-compassionate, we're okay to just, you know, be ourselves and sit on the couch all day. But really, and I really love how you mentioned that it helps us not be afraid of failure, because I really think that can hold us back and, you know, say, you know, maybe I'm not going to raise my hand in class because someone could judge me or I could say something stupid. But if we realize that, you know, everyone says something silly sometimes, no one's going to judge me, we kind of lessen that fear, and again, we're able to do more things that let us achieve more.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And just knowing that, just because you're being kind to yourself doesn't mean that now you're going to just never try anything else. And that is actually the opposite of that. And another kind of, I guess, conception that people might have, or misunderstanding that we might have about self-compassion that I wanted to bring up, is that of self-compassion versus self-pity. Because I think, sometimes self-pity is like, oh, this was so hard for me and I deserve better, or it's not my fault that this didn't work out. And so I'm curious, because obviously they're two different things, because self-pity can be a little bit more destructive. Could you tell us a bit more about self-pity versus self-compassion and how we can tell the difference within ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is also another common misconception. So again, I'm glad you're asking this question. So self-pity, as you were saying, is, oh, poor me, this shouldn't have happened to me, I don't deserve this. Self-compassion is, oh, I feel bad that this happened, but you know what? This is normal. This happens to everybody at some point or another. So it includes the common humanity piece. So with self-pity, you're completely negating the common humanity piece. With self-compassion, you're saying, yeah, this feels really bad right now. I don't like this feeling. I'm sad. But sadness is part of life. It's part of being human. Everybody feels sad at some point or another. So self-pity is very isolating. Self-compassion is not. Self-compassion is actually very uniting and connecting with others.
Absolutely. It's kind of like,
so much.
It's like watching over that dialogue again, your self-dialogue of like, am I just blaming the whole wide world against me? Or am I realizing like, you know what, it's me and the whole wide world are in this kind of together, and it's happening to everyone at some point.
Yeah, and I think a really crucial piece like that like differentiates the two is one takes accountability while the other doesn't. So self-pity is kind of averting that, oh, it's not my fault, I didn't know this, or like they didn't tell me that, this was on the test. When I think that self-compassion is, maybe I didn't study as well as I thought I did, and it kind of takes into account that maybe it wasn't we didn't do well, and that's okay. Yeah. And next time we'll do better.
Or like in a relationship, instead of blaming the other person, being like, oh, I can't believe that they didn't communicate well with me, being like, well, you know what, maybe I wasn't the most clear communicator, but that's okay, because now I'm going to do X next time, or this to make up for it, or whatever it might be.
Right, and I'm so glad you brought up the point about accountability, because that's really important. That with self-compassion, there's always accountability. We're not dismissing accountability. You make a mistake, you've got to own up to your mistake, and you've got to rectify it. You have to apologize. And actually, there's research showing that, and this is research with adults, showing that adults who are more self-compassionate are more ready to apologize, to take, forgive others, and because again, they don't. There isn't so much fear of failure. It's not like I'm a bad person if I admit I made a mistake. It just means I'm human.
I love that so much. And you have an entire book on self-compassion and ADHD. How does ADHD impact self-compassion?
Yeah, so first I just want to clarify that I am not the ADHD expert. I did this book with Mark Burton, who is this ADHD expert, but I did learn a lot from doing this book with Mark Burton. And the main thing that I learned is that kids who have ADHD receive a lot of, for lack of a better word, reprimands from parents, from teachers, from others who are all well-meaning, and trying to get them to, take responsibility for their homework, or manage their time better, or whatever. And what often ends up happening, unfortunately, is that these kids internalize these messages that they get from adults around them, and they feel really badly about themselves, and they're very self-critical. They have very strong, harsh self-critic. So that's why we wanted to do this book on kids for kids with ADHD and their parents.
That's so powerful because it's true. And I think, outside of ADHD, if you are surrounded by people who really criticize you harshly and not just like constructively, but like, oh, you didn't do a good job on this or whatever it might look like, it can also kind of really feed into a very poor self-image. And I think that it's very powerful to realize that like, you can take power over your own relationship to yourself. And I think that obviously with ADHD, that's such a big contributing factor. And so I think it's incredible the work that you're doing with all kids and teens and adults, including those who have ADHD.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's also really interesting is I know at the beginning of this interview, you mentioned that you were listening to these poems, which really helped you find more self-compassion. And what I think is personally really interesting is that the way, like what we hear actually makes such a huge impact on it because we really internalize so many things that we hear. If someone's telling us that, you're stupid, you're not enough, and all the time, not just one time, that's kind of like the gist of what we get from a lot of people around us who are negative and toxic. We're going to absorb that and we're going to believe that, and then we're going to be acting in ways that might be making us see maybe if someone's telling us we're stupid, we're not going to perform as well on a test.
And then we also start to tell ourselves that.
Absolutely. Yeah. But if you're listening to just something that's positive and uplifting, it doesn't even need to be directed towards you, but it just makes such a huge impact on your life that is so positive. And I think that's really the power of like listening and kind of picking the people that, and honestly sounds that you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like the two different kinds of coaches, right? You can have the harsh coach who, says mean things and yells at you all the time, or you can have the kind supportive coach, right? Who also wants you to do well at whatever particular sport it is, but does it in a lot nicer way, in a kinder way. Who do you want to listen to? You want to, and who's going to encourage you more? Is it going to be the one who's yelling at you all the time, or is it going to be the coach that's, says, wow, I know you can do this. I know you can do this. I have faith in you. You can do this. Go out there and show us,
I think so, yeah, totally. The more supportive coach is always the one we want to be with. And I think this is powerful as a friend or like as a family member or whoever you are in other people's lives, to be that positive coach, to not only, practice self-compassion to yourself, but also to be really compassionate and friendly to others, because then you can make sure you're surrounding yourself with those types of people as well. And it's so important in our world, to be that kind of kind person and then also get that back from those people that you're around. Outside of your ADHD book, you also have a self-compassion workbook, which I'm so curious about. Could you tell us a little teaser or maybe an activity, anything from that for us and our audience?
Oh, it's hard. There are so many, and I have, besides the book on ADHD and the workbook, I have a couple of other books also, one of which is for educators in schools. And it breaks down our 8-session self-compassion program into 16 shorter sessions so that it can be taught within the classroom. But something from the book, it's hard, and a lot of these activities are in a number of the books. Hard to choose just one. Okay, I'll choose one, which is one of my favorites. And we have this at the very beginning of our program. Although it's in session 7 of the adult program, we put it right up front because the purpose of it is to instill the idea in teens, or the knowledge in teens, that we all have a kind, compassionate voice within us. And I think most people don't know that. Most teens don't know that. Most adults don't know that. So the way this, and it's a guided practice, and we present it saying that this is a practice that uses your imagination, and if you're into fantasy and imaginary stuff, then you'll love this. And so the first thing is to imagine a place that where you feel comfortable and safe, and we give a lot of we talk about that quite a bit. Imagine, this could be a place on a cloud. It could be a corner of your bedroom. It could be a place in the middle of the woods. It could be at the beach, whatever. So teens will imagine a place that feels right for them, where they feel safe. And then they imagine a friend coming to greet them. And the friend is their compassionate friend who knows them very well, knows them better than anyone else, and is a voice of complete kindness and support. Very loving presence. And so we take them through this whole process, and we invite them to, if the compassionate friend wants to say something to them, they can listen to the voice of the compassionate friend, and words might come up, and then they have the option of saying something to their friend, to the compassionate friend. If they want, they can respond. And then the compassionate friend leaves, and we end with saying, you can call back this compassionate friend whenever you'd like, but please remember that this compassionate friend is a part of you. This is a voice that you have inside yourself that is there all the time, that you can call upon whenever you need to. You gave this voice came from within you, so you always have it. So, so when teens finish doing that practice, they understand that, I might have that inner critical voice, but I also have that inner compassionate voice. It may be very soft, it may be very small, because it doesn't get a lot of attention. It doesn't get fed very much, right? But it is there. And that if we spend more time listening to it, it can get louder, it can get stronger, and then it can be there for us. And by the way, I just have to share with you, my compassionate friend is behind, on the wall behind me, that you can see. I know listeners can't see it, but when I do this practice, what comes up for me is my grandfather, because he was this very, very kind, gentle man. And so I have my compassion. I have photos of him all around my office, and particularly the back wall is dedicated to him. So I have that around me all the time. Feels great.
That's so beautiful. And I really like that exercise of learning, you can have this compassionate person in your life, and maybe just like for you, it's someone like tangible, like it's like, your friend or your aunt or your sibling or your parent, but knowing that like what they're saying to you in your, imaginary situation is actually your own inner voice. And I think it's so true. Like, we are so critical of ourselves, but yet we all crave those, relationships where people tell us that we're doing a good job and validate our emotions. And that's a part of our human nature. So why can't we do that for our own selves? There's no reason why not. And I think that's so, so beautiful.
Yes, and I love so much having someone that you love kind of attached to that, someone who would give you those words, because when you know something like they would say, it's easier to kind of pull that up instead of trying to, I think that just makes it a lot easier. But in the end, the words are all still yours, which I think is so beautiful and so empowering.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention that because not every teen has somebody like that in their lives. So it can be somebody imaginary, it could be somebody that you from a book you've read, or a movie or whatever, it can be somebody you create out of your own imagination. It doesn't have to be an actual human.
Totally.
I love that.
Or even like a pet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mercedes and I have been loving our subscription to the meditation app Waking Up. It is so amazing. It has so many different meditations that you can try and listen to, and the best part is they even have different episodes that you can listen to that talks about why meditation is so important and can really help you out.
Grab a 12-month-long, yes, a full year subscription to Waking Up and save $30 off the first year by clicking the link in our show notes.
Now let's get back into the episode.
You have really helped so many teens help silence their inner critic and bring out the self-compassionate friend. But if we could hear your inner voice at 16, what was it saying back then?
Well, first of all, I wanted just to clarify. We don't really want to silence the critical voice, because first of all, the critical voice is part of us, and the critical voice has good intentions usually, right? Usually that critical voice is there because it wants us to improve or motivate us, or, it wants the best for us. And often it goes over the top, and that's when we have to kind of ask it to be a little quiet, So we don't really want to silence it. We want to invite it in. We want to welcome it and just say, you know what? I'm not going to listen to you so much right now. You can have a seat over there on the couch. Take a chill. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to pay so much attention to you. So I just want to clarify that. At age 16, my inner critical voice was loud and clear. It was, I was one of those teens that struggled a lot with feeling insecure, feeling unworthy, feeling just, not confident, which is really why I do this work, right? Because I don't want other teens to go through the kind of feelings about themselves the way I did. And I also know that that they don't have to, that it's not necessary, that you can have a different relationship with yourself. You can be kinder to yourself.
I love that.
That's
Thank
very
you for
beautiful.
for opening up, because I think it's so beautiful how you also know what it's like to have that super loud voice that's telling you you're not good enough or you're not worthy. And I think that aligns with so much our own podcast. Like, we started our whole business, Small Bits of Happiness, because we were struggling to feel happy during COVID. And so I think it just shows that it's not about, having this toxic positivity or toxic compassion of thinking oh, everything is great all the time. It's knowing that, yes, it can be hard, but here's what I can do or focus or say instead. And I think that is just all the more empowering.
Absolutely. And I think to take a moment and see, you've come such a far way from where you started at 16. And I think, one, it's amazing when you're able to kind of solve that problem for yourself, but it's even better that you have gone out of your way to help so many other teens and adults help themselves with their own issues with self-compassion. I just really think that's amazing. And thank you for all your work.
Absolutely.
I was going to thank you for all your work. I'm just so impressed with all the work that you do, getting this message out there to teens and to others, because it's just so essential.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much. And as we know, being a teen is not easy. Being a tween is not easy. And being there's so many challenges at any stage, but especially in those teenage years. And as someone who's also worked with parents and teachers, as you were mentioning, what role do adults, because a lot of adults also listen to our show, and what role do adults play in a teenager's journey towards self-compassion? Do you have any advice for parents who want to foster a more self-compassionate mindset in their kids, or maybe even for themselves?
Absolutely, yes. Adults have to, in order to do this, they have to practice self-compassion themselves, right? And you can't fake it. You have to really do it. There's a lot of resources now out there for adults. So there's lots of books. There are also lots of classes that are offered. There are also shorter, there used to just be classes like these 8-week-long classes. Now there's workshops, there's hour-long webinars and seminars and available to learn how to do this for yourselves. And again, remember that our culture doesn't teach us this at all. Our culture actually teaches us the opposite, teaches us how to be hard on ourselves, and teaches us you need all these different products in order to be worthy, for starters. So absolutely what I would recommend for adults to do for themselves and to do for their kids, teens and younger kids, is to model self-compassion. I'll just give you one website where you can access lots of information about self-compassion, and that is Kristen Neff's website, and she's the person who started, who first defined and operationalized self-compassion in 2003. Her website is selfcompassion.org, hyphenated, self-compassion.org. I think the only other thing I want to say about this is we know that our kids learn from watching us as adults. Our kids and teens may not look like, that they're watching us, but what we know is that they're still looking at what we're doing. So if we're, cooking dinner and we burn something, we have a choice point rather than saying, ugh, I'm such an idiot, that was so stupid, I should have known better, I need to pay more attention, that negative self-talk. We can model saying, oh, I have a choice here right now. I can beat myself up, or I can say something to myself like, wow, you had a really hard day, like you had a really full day at work, you picked the kids up at their various activities, now you're home making dinner. It's a lot. So give yourself a break, sit down, take a minute, take a few deep breaths, listen to a piece of music, whatever, and then go back and cook dinner. So to model that kind of behavior and even model that choice point is helpful for your kids.
I love that. I think that's so important because we really do learn so much from examples. So being able to step into that, kind of know what you want for your child or your teen, and just kind of choose to do that as well. So
and even, I think just knowing if you're struggling to kind of step into your own self-compassion, knowing that by embodying this, you're going to help the people that you care about also emulate that is such a great way to get into that habit. And I think even for teens, like modeling that mindset to your younger siblings or to your friends, like having a purpose beyond yourself, if you're struggling to see the reason for it in yourself, like that's such a great way to kind of motivate yourself to step into that habit and then establish it into your lifestyle.
Absolutely. And your courses have helped so many people, and you've seen so many transformations through self-compassion. What is one of the most unforgettable moments that made you stop and think that this is why I do this?
Oh my goodness, there's been a lot of them. Certainly when I do research and we get the results and it shows that, we just taught a bunch of kids self-compassion, and depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation has decreased. There have been many moments at that point when I say, oh, I am so glad that I do this work. It's helping kids. One particular story I'll share with you, though, that always stays with me, and this was early on. We're teaching our self-compassion class, and there was a 15-year-old boy in there who was taking the class for the second time. And I think it was his delivery of this comment that it was so authentic, the way he said this. He just all of a sudden just stopped and said, you know what? I don't care if other people don't like me. I like me. And all of us around there were like, ooh, like our jaws, we're just all smiling and so happy because it was just so, the way he said it was just so authentic. We knew that this was coming from some deep part of himself. It's like, yeah, who cares if other people don't like me? I like me. Doesn't matter what other people think. I love that moment.
That's adorable. I think that's so powerful, and something we should all strive to have within our mindsets. And it just goes to show the power of self-compassion. And now we have a few quick kind of rapid fire questions we always like to wrap up the conversation with. So for starters, do you have a song that instantly puts you in a good mood?
Yes. Brave by Sarah Bareilles. I love that. It just makes me happy.
I love that. It's a very good song. What is one piece of advice that you wish you could give your teenage self?
Oh, I would say, sit back, stop worrying so much. You're fine. You're great. You're awesome. You're perfectly imperfect, and that's totally fine,
I think we could all hear that and need to listen to it.
Absolutely.
What is something that you do every day that brings you a small bit of happiness?
Yeah, that's an easy one for me. I live on the salt marsh in North Carolina, and actually both sides of the house face the salt marsh, but I look out and I see egrets and herons and often dolphins, in my backyard, but just to like hear the birds, just absolutely makes me feel wonderful every day, every moment I hear that. It's just nature, and it just, to me, what it's saying is it doesn't matter, all the other stuff that's going on in your life, in the world, whatever. There's still these moments of joy that are accessible to you at all times.
Beautiful.
I love
Such like a
that.
grounding moment of like life beyond, what's going on the news or on our phone or at work or in our relationships. It's such a nice way to kind of detach.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And do you have a motivational that you love and
Motivational
remember?
quote?
Yes, sorry. A motivational quote that you love and remember, and if so, why?
Yeah, well, it's hard to choose, but I think I'm going to go with the one that I actually first heard in that Poetry of Self-Compassion tape that I was telling you about, that first got me started on self-compassion. And it's from the poem Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. And it starts with, and it's really just the first part of it. I mean, the whole poem's great, but the first part of it is, you do not have to be good. You do not have to crawl on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And to me, that's just saying, just be yourself, You don't have to achieve great things. Just be yourself. And the poem goes on to say, meanwhile, while you're being self-critical, while you're being so hard on yourself, there's all these wonderful things going on out there. There's wonderful things to access and to see and to do, and you're missing out because you're being hard on yourself.
I love
Yes.
that. That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us.
That's a great poem, and I think that's a great quote from the poem.
Definitely.
If our audience wants to keep up and learn more about you, Karen, where would be the best place for them to go and find you?
Well, there's actually 2 websites with very different purposes. There's my main website, which is just KarenBluth.com. There's a new website for teens that I really am trying to get the word out there, because it's all self-compassion resources for teens. And the website is selfcompassionforteens.org. Hyphenated. Self-compassion is hyphenated. forteens.org. And so there's stories, short videos of teens telling stories about how they learned about self-compassion and the impact it had on them. There's music, different pieces of music on there. There's short videos about what self-compassion is, etc., etc., etc. So those 2.
Amazing.
Yeah, those sound like terrific resources, and we will for sure have those linked in the show notes for anyone who wants to go and take a look. They definitely should. And thank you again, Karen, for joining us today and sharing your incredible story and all your amazing hacks and, actionable things that we can do starting now to boost that self-compassion. And yeah, just thank you again for all your time today.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me. It's been fun.
If you enjoyed this episode, we think you would love our conversation with Phil Rosenthal, who Karen actually went to high school with. Isn't that so cool? We love
When
Phil.
we heard that, we were like, that's
Yes,
crazy.
we love Phil, and his episode we love as well. So you should definitely check it out. Phil talks to us all about what he's learned about happiness from traveling the world, his advice for a stronger sibling bond, as well as how you can stay spontaneous.
I'd never been anywhere, but I went to Paris. What I'm going to tell you, that it changes your life.
You can listen to our episode with Phil Rosenthal now. It's linked in the show notes.
If you enjoyed this week's episode of Hack Your Happiness, please leave us a 5-star review from wherever you're listening. It really helps us out. We really appreciate it, and it helps attract new viewers to our podcast. See you next time.